What? Yeah. I guess we'll get started here shortly. We can't hear you. How about no? Uh, oh, somebody has joined the Zoom. Okay. Somebody can hear me. Cool. All right. Um, that being said, I'll just share my screen with the source sheet. Just so I don't have to. Yeah. Um, just so I don't have to send the link out to all y'all. 1 second here. Which option do I want? Why am I? Go. Let's get rid of that. Why can't I make it full? There we go. That's what I want. Oh, that's not what I want. I don't know how Macs work. Command F11. No. Okay. So with that being said, I guess I'll start. It's kind of
Hopefully, I'll be here.
I think I'm back.
On track.
Or Benjamin on my back.
And hopefully, I'll be able to listen for a little bit. We'll see.
Okay. Thank you very much. All right. So I'm gonna reshare my screen because that undid itself. And then we're gonna get started. Today's topic is about cochlear implants. In case you guys were unsure. Is it just not letting me do this? Okay, fine. I'm done fighting with technology. So share is titled Cochlear Implants. Did you hear that? Before I get started, I just want to make sure everybody is aware that we're running a fundraising campaign right now. If you need a link, you can message me or anybody connected to Shiva, and we can give you a link. But thank you all for joining. I don't want to mess up Mrs. Ebner's chair, so. So I came to this topic because I know a nice young little gentleman who has cochlear implants, and he's lives his life just like the rest of us. And I was wondering, how would he perform certain mitzvot? There are certain mitzvot that are that hearing is like required for them, or like they're based on hearing. For example, like shofar, the Megillah, right? We know if you miss a word of the Megillah, you hear it all again. So there are a few of these mitzvot that have a hearing component to them, and I was always wondering if somebody with a cochlear implant could be yotzei these mitzvot. So I dove into the topic. It was very interesting. And this is what I have to share with you guys. So we're going to paint a little bit of a story of a young boy named Shimon, who he has cochlear implants. Again, like I said, functions regularly like everybody else. But what are his obligations as a Jew and mitzvot that require hearing? Does it count really as hearing to hear using cochlear implants? So we're gonna start with some primary sources. We're gonna start with Mishnah and a Gemara, and then we're gonna move on to some more contemporary sources. So the first source I have quoted here is Masachet Rosh Hashanah. Let me see if I can do a is there like I don't want like the draggy like a cursor kind of thing? That's the thing.
Just highlight section.
Okay. Um, so I'll do without it. But so we start off in the Masachet Rosh Hashanah, where we see that the mitzvah, this is where the mitzvah is like the original makor of the mitzvah comes from, the Masechet Rosh Hashanah. And we have this rule in Perek Gimel Mishnah Zayin, and it says Hatokel letoch habor, or letoch hadut, or letoch hapitas, im kol shofar shama yatsa. So if somebody is blowing the shofar in a some sort of cellar, like someplace surrounded by cement walls, um, in a barrel, some sort of essentially to kind of almost make the sound reverberate a little bit more. Or if he's in a hole in a pit, im kol shofar shama yatsa. If he hears the sound of the shofar, then he has filled his obligations. Ve'im kol havra'a shama lo yatsa. And if he hears this kol havra, so there are differing opinions about what a kol havra is that we'll get into. But it sounds like there's some sort of caveat to the rule, right? So this havra could be it's understood as an echo, but we'll see that there's two different opinions on what an echo really means. Um, so again, if you hear this via an echo, it doesn't count. So let's figure out a little bit more what the Mishnah is referring to. What would be a kol havra in this case? So the source two, we have the Gemara Masechet Rosh Hashanah, Daf Kaf Zayin Amud Bet. This says Hatokel letoch habor or letoch hadut hule. So he's quoting our Mishnah as Gemara would often start. Amar Rav Huna says Lo shanu ela lo tan homdim al sfat habor. Aval lo tan homdim babor yatsu. So he specifies that Rav Huna specifies that it doesn't change if you're inside of the pit, only if you're outside. So clearly there's some sort of distance aspect, whether that be what the distance would do maybe with the sound waves, or just the distance in general. It's also quoted, I believe, in the same Gemara about walking past the shofar. Excuse me. Well, sorry, it's written in the Mishnah about walking past the shofar, like the sound of shofar, whether you have the kavana or not. But clearly, there's some sort of distance aspect, and the question is really what like disqualifies almost the sound of the shofar, because based on this, it seems like it's a distance aspect. Because like quiet or louder, does that mean if I'm standing in the back of shul, I am not yotze with shofar just because it's quieter? So it's an interesting question that we raised from the Gemara. And that being said, we move into the Biur Halacha. So the Biur Halacha is a commentary written on the Shulchan Aruch, and the Biur Halacha is written by somebody better known as Chafetz Chaim Rabbi Yisrael Meir Kagan, and he was a 19th century gadol. He lived into the 20th century. Lots of books on Rosh Hashanah. Sorry, not Rosh Hashanah, Lashon Hara. Sorry. And so he quotes the Taz, and the Taz says, Kol havra, kol chalush, v'kol hanishma, michutz labinyan. So he says that a kol havra is a weak sound from a distance, like I was painting the picture before. And that makes sense according to the Gemara, because the Gemara says if you're within the hole, if you're within the pit, then you are yotze no matter what. So the Taz would understand that a weak sound from a distance wouldn't work. But the Biur Halacha says that ani daiti, according to my humble opinion, the kol havra more le'inyan shofar perusho kol me'urvav. So he disagrees, and he says that this kol havra is a is a voice, is some sort of sound that is reverberated. It is a mixture of sounds. So if we have a mixture of sounds, according to the Taz, a hearing aid would seemingly not work because it picks it up and it drops them off. It's a little bit different, but according to the understanding of the Taz, it makes it louder, so there's no problem of sound because you hear it the same as you would before. Like I said, the Biur Halacha would say, no, that's not true because it's a mixture of sound. The sound comes in as the shofar and it changes and it becomes some sort of mixture of sound. So this would bring up the question about also about microphones and speaker systems. Sorry, I just have a bit of a sore throat. So our next source 4, is the Minchat Shlomo. So Rav Shlomo Zalman was a 20th century posek here in Yerushalayim, and as we'll see in this tshuva, a lot of what he did was related to electricity. He was one of the first major poskim who really wrote about electricity and how we could take it into account for thoughts like Shabbat and others. And here we see that he's going to deal with shofar in the context of Mikra Megillah. A microphone in the context of Mikra Megillah, as well as a little bit of shofar. And I left a large part of the tshuva here just because I think it's important and it's very interesting. For time's sake, I'm going to skip to the bolded part just because I have an hour, but I don't necessarily want to take the full hour. So he says, Afilu hachi, even here, Pashuthu, Shelo yatsa klal yidei chovat hashofar. Ho'il, vehu shomea achshav rak kol membrana min hataklit velo kol shofar. So Minchat Shlomo, Rav Shlomo Zalman, or Rabach, understands that the way a microphone and speaker system worked, again, at least at the time of his tshuva, was that the way it works, right, is that the microphone receives, vibrations from your voice and it recreates them. So if it recreates them, what he says is that you're no longer hearing the kol shofar, you're hearing some other sort of voice, I guess. You hear the sound that's reproduced. And this would make sense, however, we would find it a little bit troubling for our hearing aids case because, again, for the hearing aids, that's essentially how a hearing aid functions. It functions as a microphone and a speaker, right? You have the little piece on the outside that will function as like the transmitter. And then the piece that goes inside the ear is actually the speaker system. And that makes it louder so that people who are hard of hearing can hear better. And he goes on, and I just left this in because I thought it was important. He says, "V'lachein tma ani me'od al kama migdulei harabanim shehitiru lismoa mikra megillah derech magbir kol ve'echo samu libam lidvar zeh sherak kol tenudot shel membrana shomim v'lo kol mikra megillah shel adam." So he brings it up in the context of Megillah, and he says, I question these other big rabbis who made it sound like it's okay to use a microphone in the context of Mikra Megillah because, right, you're no longer hearing the voice of the person, you're hearing a recreation. You're hearing the sound waves coming from the speaker system, coming from the microphone, but not really straight from the person. So again, according to hearing aids, this is questionable, and Rav Shlomo Zalman would say, no, it doesn't work for something in the case of shofar or in the case of Mikra Megillah. Now, we're going to take a quick break to explain what cochlear implants are. Right, so again, just to recap the first half, we saw this question about this kol havra and what this echo means. And again, according to Minchat Shlomo, our little boy here, Mr. Shimon, would not be able to biyotze, the mitzvot, um, in the context of shofar or mikra Megillah. However, the way cochlear implants work, I believe I attached, here we go, I attached a very nice diagram, is very different to the way a hearing aid works, right? Like I said earlier, a hearing aid works via a speaker system, and it works via a speaker system, so it goes in and then it just reverberates a little bit louder inside the person's ear, so it's louder and they can hear. However, the way cochlear implants work is it actually bypasses the whole ear, and we'll see why that's important shortly. But just for context on how your ear works, when sound waves enter your ear, they're little like hair fibers that are assigned different frequencies, and they, get shaken up, and then it transmits signals to your brain. Don't ask me how God did that. He works in mysterious ways. And I think it's fascinating. But anyways, so the way the cochlear implant works is it bypasses the ear and it goes straight to the cochlea, which is the organ, the auditory, sorry, not organ, the auditory nerve that sends the brain functions sends the sound waves to the brain. So this is the outer part. I'm sure you've seen some people who have worn it before. As for the way it works, there's a place that goes under the skin. There's a piece that goes in. It's a receiver followed by, I assume you guys can see my mouse. It's a receiver followed by a cable that then goes into the cochlea. And again, the way it works is there are different fibers all along. And so it goes all the way in and around. And when it receives something from the transmitter, which is on the outside of the person, it sends the vibrations via these little vibration things, whatever you want to call them. And then it gets transmitted to the brain. So again, we have the same unit here for the microphone is the same as a hearing aid. However, it transmits it via this cable and electrical vibration. So that brings into question a lot of what we said, because we can no longer bring comparison between a microphone and a speaker and hearing aids in the case of a cochlear implant. Just for some historical context, the first cochlear implant was implanted by William House and John Doyle of Los Angeles, California in 1961. In 1964, they placed a 6-channel electrode through the promontory and vestibule directly into the modulus. Basically, fancy words for all of what I just described to you. They entered it through here. I think now they have 12 channels, if I'm not mistaken. I could be wrong. But it was a 6-channel in here, and it really improves the hearing of somebody who's hearing impaired. And then in 1973, the first international conference on basically cochlear implants was organized in San Francisco. And here in Israel, we didn't get the first cochlear implant until 1989, which is honestly not so bad as far as years go. But, excuse me. And in 2019, they celebrated a total of 3,000 implants in the state of Israel. I'm not entirely sure what their number is up to now. And I saw a lot about researching. There's a lot of the cochlear implants actually are to serve the Arab/Palestinian community here. So I just thought that was interesting. So now that we hopefully have some understanding of how these cochlear implants work, let's get back to our little boy Shimon, who has these cochlear implants, and let's see what we see in more modern sources. So also, I don't know if there's how many people are on the Zoom, but if you have questions and you can get them to me, I'm happy to take questions. We should have time at the end. So the first modern source we'll look at is a book called Tchumen. What Tchumen is, it stands for Torah, Chochmah, and Medina. It's a Dati Leumi halachic journal They discuss all sorts of topics, some from poskim, some from big rabbis, some from professionals in their field, etc. It's a really cool book. There are quite a few volumes to it, and they come out, I believe, with a new one each year. So the first is from 2014-2015 from Rabbi Chaim Navon, again here in Israel. He was a student of Rav Aaron Lichtenstein in Yeshivat Har Etzion, and currently he still teaches at Har Etzion. He teaches in Lindenbaum and Nishmat, which is a girls' Beit Midrash program that serves uh, to add Yoetzet Halachot to the world. Um, and Rab Novon also has translated Rab Soloveitchik and Rab Lichtenstein's work, so he's really nobody to just brush off. He's a big Talmud Chacham. I actually have some friends who learn at Lindenbaum. But anyways, let's see what Rav Navon has to say. So we'll start right here by the 15, a little bit more than what's bolded, but you'll see he takes um, a very interesting approach that really I didn't see so much anywhere else. He says, "Hakolot haniklatim b'moach ovrim derech, טווחו של מכשיר מלאכותי ומדלגים על האוזן האנושית." So he says the way cochlear implants work, and he's correct about this, is that the voices they go in the microphone, and they get sent to the brain via these vibrations, and it skips on the ear. The physical ear is skipped. Ha'im efshar lehagdir tahalich kazeh kishmiah. So the question is, can you count this type of hearing as shmi'ah, as hearing, right? Meaning for halachic purposes, does it count as somebody who's shomea, or are they still considered a cheresh, a deaf person? He goes on, lichora shmi'ah hi tahalich hamitrachesh dafka betivcha shel ozen hanoshit. So he says, he seems to think that that shmi'ah, again in the context of halacha, has to be through your physical ear. קשה לראות את השתל כאוזן, וקשה גם לומר שישנה שמיעה בלי האוזן. So he says it's hard to see the cochlear implant as an ear, right? Because it's, like we showed before, it's something external. וקשה גם לומר שישנה שמיעה בלי אוזן. So he says it's also hard to say that you can have this concept of shmi'ah without having an ear, which again is a little bit odd, but totally understandable. And he goes on, he says, יתקן שמצב זה דומה במקצת לדינו של אדם שנדחס אוכל למאו בלי שיעבור דרך גרונו לעניין הגדרת תהליך זה כאכילה. So he compares it, which I found very interesting, to somebody who gets food, right? They're fed, but they're not fed through their throat or their mouth, right? It gets to them elsewhere. So you can think of this, as either some sort of IV where the fluid has the nutrients you need, or you could think of this as a feeding tube. So he draws some similarities between halacha, and his question, which I think is a very good one, is this considered, like in the case of achila, is it considered still eating even if there's a feeding tube? And so he says here, this is kind of his last hurrah, בדומה נראה שפעולת השמיעה צריכה להתרחש דווקא באוזן הטבעית, ואין די בכך שהמידע הווקאלי מגיע למוח. So he says, similarly, that the pula of shmi'ah, the action of hearing, needs to take place dafka, certainly, like specifically with the ear. The ein dai, and it's not enough that just the vocal sounds get to the brain. Meaning he thinks that really it has to happen through the ear. לכן, נראה שחרש הנעזר בשתל קוקלרי דינו כחרש המדבר ואינו שומע. בדרך טכנולוגית מתוך חכמת אנו מצליחים להביא למוחו מידע ווקאלי, אך ספק אם אפשר להגדיר זאת מבחינה הלכתית כשמיעה. So he says that it would seem to him that somebody who has a cochlear implant is regarded as somebody who is deaf, can speak but can't hear. And he says, with our, our infinite wisdom, we have made it, to be able to make it so that he can hear. However, he doesn't know if this really counts as shmiya. So again, to our little boy named Shimon, when he grows up, according to Rav Chaim Navon, it does not seem like he'd be able to read Megillah, and he'd be patur from it. Unfortunately, I'm not entirely sure what the hilchot of somebody who is deaf but can speak are, what they're yotzing, what they're not. But again, according to Rav Chaim Navon, it does not seem that that is the case, that he would be able to be fulfilled in the mitzvot.
Question from Benjamin.
Yeah, I saw your question, Rav Binyamin. I will get to it shortly. Action of eating has two effects: the taste in the mouth and the stomach of the fullness, but hearing has only one. Right. So he brings this up actually. So he says that, so that's what the question is. The question in the part that I skipped is whether the action of eating matters what gets to your stomach, or if the benefit comes from your mouth. So the poskim decide that it matters when it gets to your stomach. So in which case, it matters when it's in your mouth, right? Because the hana is the taste, the benefit is the taste. So in that case, if you don't eat through your mouth, it doesn't count as hana. So he does actually address this question. And again, for the purposes, in fact, that question actually strengthens Rav Chaim's opinion, because he would say that for shmiya, right, like he says, it has to be through the ear, and really the end result is not what matters. I hope that answered your question. Next, we will go on to the very next volume of Tchumen. This one is the next year, so presumably the one before was 2015, 2016. So I would assume that this one's 2014, 2015. So I assume this one's 2015, 2016. However, I don't have any evidence to back it up, but I believe they publish one yearly. So Rav Nachum Eliezer Rabinovitz was a Canadian-born Israeli rabbi who actually was the teacher of Rabbi Sachs in London, and is currently was the Rosh Yeshiva of Ma'ale Adumim. And he's written a lot of responsa regarding different medical topics, organ donation, surrogacy, and birth control. So he's really he's hit a wide scope of tshuvot, but he has some medical background, so I think that's important as well. So he draws parallel. He actually brings in proof from Tanakh, and he quotes Sefer Shmuel, where Eli calls out to Shmuel, and a midrash at the burning bush with Moshe, when it says that he hears the sound of Amram, his father. So Have Omer, he says, Lo kol ragil hayazeh, v'lo b'shmi'a ragila shama oto. Ub'chol zot mikra mechana zot b'shem shmi'a. So he says, and understandably so, that in both of these contexts, it's not a regular hearing like you and I think, right? It's some sort of dream, you might call it, some sort of internal voice, but yet the pasuk still uses shmi'a, this same shorish of shin mem ayin, which is the one that we called into question before. So he uses these proofs from Tanakh to say maybe you don't need to have the normal method through ears. So we'll read the last bold part. נמצא שהשומע בעל השתל שמע באותו מתכוונת ששומע בא אדם בעל אוזניים תקינות וכשאר מצוות מתקיימת בציבור. הרי אותו אדם שומע בעת ובעונה אחת עם הציבור, וכולם שומעים את אותו קול, ואף הוא יוצא ידי חובתו כמוהם. So he says, like Rav Binyamin pointed out, that he gets to the same end effect. And why should that matter? If at the end of the day, he hears what the people hear and he can respond at the same time, why do we really care like how it happens? So according to Rav Nachum Eliezer Rabinovitz, it seems that Mr. Shimon here would be able to be Yotze, Mikra Megillah, Shmiat Shofar, etc. So he really thinks that because these strong proofs that come up in Tanakh, that you're able to call somebody who uses cochlear implants as somebody who can hear. And this was almost a more convincing answer, if you ask me personally. But we're not going to stop there. We're going to go into some bigger poskim of the generation, and we'll see what they have to say. And the next tshuva we're going to see is Rav Moshe Sternbach. Rav Moshe Sternbach is, again, British, lots of Brits, who's a Israeli Haredi rabbi in Har Nof. And in South Africa, he was actually responsible for teaching some medical professionals. So again, another rabbi who has some medical background to him. I wouldn't say he's really a medical posek, but clearly he knows some things about medicine in the world of medicine. It's 1:02 a.m. and I'm not slowing down. We got two more sources. Here we go. Venira Bezeh, he says, this is in Chuvot Vahan Hagot, his halachic responsa, Chelik Vav Siman Daled. In case you want to see the whole tshuva, I didn't quote everything here. He says, Venira Bezeh, She'in Bishmiah Chisron, Bishalo Kedarko, Kivan Dishmiah, Ena Pula She'adam Oseh, Ela Hinase Me'elaha, Ukmavar Berash Benadarim, Dol Shayach Minoi Shlichut, Al Shmiah Kivan Dahu Midei, the Mimele Al Ayin Sham, Ve'im Kain, Vazeh Leka Chisron Shalo Darkinu. The Chisron Shalo Darkinu, in El B'makom Shemitzvah, O HaIsur, Hu B'maaseh, Debazeh Amrinan, Neshaseh Shalo Kedarko, In Zechashiv, Ba'asya V'lo Yata Yedei Chova. So he actually directly contradicts what Rav Chaim Navon says. And he says that in the case of somebody using a cochlear implant, since there is no method, right? There's no darko of hearing, right? When you hear, you don't have to do anything. You don't, turn on your ear or something, or even open up your ear, right? You just you're always constantly hearing. So in that case, right, in order for you to say that in order for you to say that has to be the natural way of hearing, right? He thinks there has to be a maaseh. He thinks there has to be an action. And in the case of hearing, there is no action, right? You're hearing all the time. So therefore, there's no concept of lo kedarko, because lo kedarko, right, which translates not to its ways, only happens when there is a kedarko, when there is a method, when there is an action. So this is a very interesting, almost direct contradiction to what Chaim Navon said. And unfortunately, I didn't have a chance, but I would like to reach out, and I'm curious if he knows about this tshuva and what Rav Chaim Navon would say about it. We'll keep reading. He quotes the Chazon Ish, Yesh Litzaref Bazeh Da'at HaChazon Ish Tzal Shemistapek Sholei Afilu B'Shmiya Al Yedei Machshir Shmiya Hagil Yotzei Bo Yedei Chova כיוון שהקול האחר נותר מקול המדבר וגם נשמע בשעה שמדבר, הרי מבואר שדעתו דאפילו כשיש שינוי גדול בשמיעתו, כהי שאינו שומע כלל קול המדבר, רק קול אחר שנוצר מקול המדבר. מכל מקום יש לצדד כיוון שבשמיעתו יודע מה אמר המדבר, נחשב שנפעל אותה פעולה כמו שהיה שומע קול המדבר, והלכך השיב השמיעה לצאת ידי חובה. So he brings the Chazon Ish, and the Chazon Ish says that a normal hearing aid would actually work in the context of shmi'ah, right? So that there's no issue with context of shmi'ah, and so he thinks that if even a hearing aid would work according to the Chazon Ish, then of course, why would a cochlear implant not work, right? The Chazon Ish says that because you're getting the same result at the end of the day, even though he doesn't hear the exact voice, the exact sounds, it still counts. So now we'll skip here to the last part. היוצא מדברינו, שלעניות דעתי, יש לסמוך שיוצא ידי חובה בשמיעה במכשיר, הנראה לי, בתקיעת שופר וקידוש וכיוצא בהם. So he says, according to this, right, he says if the Chazon Ish can permit the use of hearing aids, and he says this seems like enough to me to equate somebody who uses cochlear implants to somebody who uses hearing aids. So he would be able to be Yotze for Tkiat Shofar. In this case, it also brings up Kiddush and everything like it. So that would include Megillah. So here from Rav Moshe Sternbach, we see that he agrees with Rav Rubinovitz, and that to him the end goal is what matters. And if the end goal is reached, no matter in what way it's reached, the end goal is still reached, then that's what matters. So in this case, little boy Shimon could still be Yotze with Tkiat Shofar and Kiddush and Megillah and whatever other mitzvot require hearing. So now we've seen one tshuva that backs up Rav Nachum Eliezer Rabinovitz's opinion. Now we're going to go to a notebook that has an article from Rav Asher Weiss, who is the Rosh Yeshiva and modern day posek in Yerushalayim, who also serves as a posek to Sharei Tzedek. He's not like the main posek, but they do consult him. And we'll see very shortly that Rav Asher Weiss has the opposing opinion. He thinks he would agree with what Rav Chaim Navon says. And he will quote the same Garshaz, the same Rav Shlomo Zalman Auerbach that we saw before. So he says Ukfar Katag Gaon Rabbi Shimon Shlomo Zalman B'minchat Shlomo Chalk Aleph etc. The Ein Adam Yotzei Yedei Chova B'Ramkol with a microphone. Kevan she'ein kol kan kol enosh ela kol chashmali ayin sham. So he says he's not Yotzei in the case of a ramkol, of a speaker, because he's not hearing the physical noise, the noise of the human. Rather, he's hearing this electrical noise, the vibration, which is an output. Ukvar biarti shlagabe shalazeh ein nafkamina ben ramkol machshir shmiya. Says there's no difference. There's no difference whatsoever between any sort of microphone speaker system to hearing aids, which makes sense because fundamentally they work the same way. Again, just to remind you, hearing aids work with a microphone that picks it up and then says it like louder, it outputs it louder and like closer to the ear. But let's see what he has to say about cochlear implants, which again, you can't compare really, at least I don't think you could compare to the way a speaker and microphone. It says, "V'ra'iti misha katav shedamachshir ze yotzin yedei chuval chule alma לדעתי טעות בידו, וגם מכשיר זה מבוסס על מקלט זעיר שהופך את הקול האנושי לקול מלאכותי." So he says, and this is in context of a cochlear implant, he says that again, it's still transmitting it to some sort of um, uh, like technological vibrations. And again, it's not the important part being it's not the voice of the person. Who says he seems like he says that the people who are who have permitted the use of cochlear implants, he thinks they made a mistake. Ela shetachat, I'll just keep reading this whole tshuva. I have 20 minutes. Ela shetachat asher yishma adam b'klei shmiya hatvim kfim et kli hashmiya umavirim et kol hamlachtu la'etzev hashmiya v'ofen yashir, right? So it takes it directly there. There's no like repurposing it, almost like reproducing it. Karesha hanafkamina, the practical difference between shetel uvein machshir shmiya regil, ino ela be'ofen hashmiya, is only with the method of hearing. Aval ein benehem hevdel be'inyan hakol hanishma. So he says that according to him, the only difference here is in the method of hearing, but that doesn't change anything in the context of halacha. So Rav Asher Weiss would agree with Rav Chaim Navon, and he would say that it doesn't matter the end result. It really matters the method of how it gets. So according to Rav Asher Weiss, right, one of the more mainstream poskim in Israel nowadays, unfortunately for little Shimon, he wouldn't be able to read Megillah. He wouldn't be able to be Yotzei with Megillah. Obviously, he could still dress up in costumes. There's nothing wrong with that. And you can always marvel at shofar and the sound of shofar. So we've really seen the essence of the halacha, where it comes from. We've analyzed what this havra is, this echo is. And then we saw Rav Shlomo Zalman Auerbach, who immediately almost seemed to say no to hearing aids, but he did it in the context of microphones and speakers. After that, we heard the opposing opinions from two different volumes of Tchumin, again, Rav Chaim Navon and Rav Nachum Eliezer Rabinovitz, that had dissenting opinions. And then we had the last two tshuvot that we just went over, Rav Schernbach and Rav Asher Weiss, again, in opposite directions. So at the end of the day, it's really there's good halachic background to go with either answer. And in this case, there's good halachic answer. And I find personally, I find Rav Sternbach reasoning to be more convincing to me. Again, others might disagree, and that's fine. But however you wish to look at the issue, you can go either way. So again, this we've tried to answer. Obviously, we're of the Jewish faith, where many things end up in a machlokus, or the whole problem is that they're a machlokus. But again, my whole point here was just to dive into the idea of cochlear implants and how it might affect a person in halacha. And I hope that I've done a good job, and you at least are aware of some of the reasons why somebody with a cochlear implant, like our lovely example of little boy Shimon, may or may not be able to participate or be yotzei with different mitzvot. And with that, I have concluded. Mitzvah Migdal is to read it, not to hear it. Can he be yotzei by reading it himself, even though he can't hear it? So that's a good question. I'm not entirely sure the answer to that. But again, it works really a lot of times in modern would be that you hear somebody, and by hearing him, you're also yotzei. So again, I don't know the halacha like we saw in the earlier tshuva about a cheresh who's considered eino shomea, but he's medaber. I'm not entirely sure what the halachot of that would be in the context of Megillah. Those opinions that he is Yotze, can he read for others? So it seems to say what I've seen everywhere is pretty much if you can be Yotze yourself, you can be Yotze for others. But again, I don't know in the context of a Cheresh She'eno Shomea, but he's Midaber. So unfortunately, my scope of knowledge is not wide enough yet to answer these questions. But if there are any other questions that anybody has, I'll stay on for just a minute or two.
I hope you send an email to Rav Chaim Navon.
One more time.
Send an email to Rav Chaim Navon.
Yeah, I will. I just have to figure out how to get his contact information. I know Rav Berman's wife teaches or is the head of Lindenbaum, so I will be I'll be looking into that.
That was very nice. I was with my father-in-law. We're doing the drive. He also very much enjoyed. So, Shal Koach.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I believe there's now 13 minutes until the next year. I hope everybody had some sort of takeaway. Thank you very much. And I guess have a good evening, day, night, afternoon, whatever time of day. Enjoy the rest of your day.
Have a good night, Ilan.
Have a good night.